Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and for the last number of years, I had a pleasure of hosting this channel where we have been bringing interesting topics and conversations, great technology leaders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs to talk to us about topics relevant to technology leaders and technology curious audiences. Today, though, is a very special conversation. We're going to be talking about a very, very important and very, very timely topic. The topic of artificial intelligence and Gen AI in the context of bias and inclusivity. And we know that this is one of the most transformational technologies that is upon us. We have an opportunity to shape the future that we want to create for us. And we all know, of course, that dealing with bias, dealing with inclusivity is going to be fundamentally important to get this right. So I'm thrilled to be welcoming a number of guests today who are going to share their views and opinions on this particular topic. We will start with a view into the report that Deloitte will be publishing in a couple of weeks' time. So this is a very early pre-release kind of conversation. But then we're going to welcome a panel to unpack this topic for us. Now, this is a live conversation, and that means that you can join the conversation. And I would invite you to use the Q&A function of the Zoom platform if you would like to submit any questions or comments throughout. So in the panel today, we will be joined by Alex Coleman, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister and CIO with the Ontario government. We also have Craig Pinnock, who is the CFO of Northbridge Financial Group. We'll be joined by Shannon Lundquist, the Vice Chair of Deloitte Canada, and Aisha Greene. Aisha, who is the Director and a Leader of Deloitte's Gen AI practice. And we're going to start with you, Aisha, actually. I would love to actually give you a chance to briefly introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do at Deloitte, and please share with our audience that report that we are going to be producing, where it started, what was the driver, what were the findings. Aisha, please, over to you. And Aisha, you might be on mute.
Thanks for that, Dalibor. I get that at least once a day. You might be on mute, so thanks for that.
Look what I have.
That's a perfect start. That's a perfect start. And thank you for that introduction and also for kicking us off for this session. My name is Aisha Greene. I sit within our Deloitte practice of our generative AI arm. So not only having conversations about what is the topic of AI and generative AI, but also stimulating conversations of how our clients look to adopt these technologies as we start to see the different folds and manifestations of how it's being used not only for our clients, but also across our community. Over the last few months, however, we started to ask the question of how we are using generative AI and does it have an equitable place in terms of our understanding within different communities. This specific report was sponsored by our Deloitte's Black Action Council with a keen focus to understand how specifically those types of technologies can impact our world. But let's look at Canada specifically and how we are starting to invest and also think about the uses of these technologies. In the next few years, it's already estimated that over $187 billion will be dedicated to productivity gains from AI. That's a massive contribution given that Canada stands as one of the few countries who hasn't actually gained in terms of our productivity insights over the last 10 years. And our federal government has already signaled an interest in really committing to the change that we see within this sector of $2.4 billion federal package that will be committed to making not only Canada competitive, but also setting ourselves on the world stage in terms of the types of solutions that we develop. Many people have already recognized the benefits of AI and generative AI, from efficiency to productivity gains to accelerating how we innovate to tailoring particular experiences with our customers. But with the rapid use of these tools also emerges risk, and some of these risks are not new. from bias and discrimination, and we've seen this in the past through hiring and recruitment, to even using for facial recognition. So there have been several instances where, unfortunately, really face recognition has been used to not only signal different biases when it's in the AI systems or algorithms, but also tailoring for policing and sometimes the disadvantage that does happen when you are a visible minority. But there are some other downstream effects of these bias and discriminations that may happen within AI tools, from data privacy concerns to security risks to even reliability. Though generative AI has a lot of opportunities and innovations that are coming forward, there is the risk that some of those realities that we see within these tools may not be accurate. And when you have a system that is fostered on information that is not accurate, it can have many different trickle effects to communities that are at risk. But there is an economic advantage to inclusivity. Within the Black community specifically, we are the third largest growing community within Canada. Equity seeking groups, including Black Canadians, will pay premiums for services that they deem as being part of their own identity, but also part of using it in terms of creating unique segmentation. This is an opportunity for businesses to not only think about where is there are advantages, but how do you start to create new offerings? So for our thesis for this paper, we really want to investigate whether or not AI systems could be designed equitably, but also driving economic advantages for enterprises. To support this research, we ended up doing a national survey, which surveyed over 646 executives across Canada. We had several focus groups that really did kind of go into conversations with executives where they saw opportunities and pain points. And we also did secondary research to support our findings. But what did we hear? So, in terms of the opportunities that lay in for specifically AI and generative AI, we heard that these are unique tools in the terms of designing our future. Having ability to create even through images, text, having a coach to support your needs was unique in terms of its capabilities. We also saw that and heard for Black professionals that who were early adopters to these tools and technologies, they would be at advantage not only to find new jobs, new opportunities for wealth growth, but also opportunities within the market to identify new products and services that were unique to them. And this is not only unique for the Black community, this was also seen from our research from other equity serving groups or seeking groups. For Black professionals as well, we heard that this is a powerful tool to be seen and heard. And we've already seen for some of the image generation tools that a lot of tools, unfortunately, can be an elimination of Black people being seen within these tools and being conveyed within these tools, from not even being visualized in some content generation to also skewing some of the outputs in terms of professionals, as well as actually seeing them in unique professions that may be outside of their realm, but also for businesses, not seeing them in terms of how they can contribute to new product offerings was also a unique challenge. But we also heard that having an element of the human in the loop was also vital for the creation of these tools. So there's no denying that the vision and the opportunities of AI and generative AI through text, code, the multimodality of these operations present unique opportunities for businesses, communities, and individuals. But what are the challenges that are being faced by the uses of these tools? We heard that the pressing concerns raised by these tools are bias concerning specifically the perpetuation of past stereotypes, which have been known to impact not only the representation, visualization of Black professionals and other equity seeking groups, but also being felt like you're heard and included. For brand recognition and loyalty, most equity seeking groups will gravitate to consumer groups or even to businesses that do reflect their values, their cultural norms, and also their insights. We also saw unique challenges in terms of understanding equitably how you can educate yourself and find job opportunities given the natures of these tools to change and the nature of work and for both white collar and blue collar workers. But what were some of the other findings that we found also interesting from this report was that only 1 in 20 felt that existing AI frameworks and equity serving frameworks actually worked in terms of addressing bias. And 78% of those who we surveyed felt that there was a necessary need to have regular audits of these AI systems. But there is a silver lining to this. AI and generative AI could be used as a teaching moment, not only to foster as a co pilot in terms of understanding how to have conversations both empathetically, but also fostering a level of trust in terms of development of these tools. And understanding and appreciating the different contexts that different equity seeking groups bring to the table was also seen as a unique opportunity of these types of tools and technologies. So, how do we start to design our future in a way that builds inclusivity? So, we certainly heard themes of bias, responsible AI, making sure that regulations were in place, but also looking at the workforce dynamics and seeing how we can equitably provide access to these tools that create an advantage for different employers as well as different consumer groups in terms of the different product offerings that come forward. The way we take action is not only looking at the technology. We've always had a saying, technology is easy. It's the people element that can also be quite difficult. And so the people element is fostering a level of education and trust so people understand what these tools are and understand how to use it. It's also about educating ourselves on the different facets of unique segmentation within a market that also build on trust, loyalty, and a consumer bracket. To give you an example of how big this opportunity could be, within the US alone, it's estimated that the Black consumer market alone is going to be at least of over $180 billion. And we can already see recognition from superstars and celebrities who have created tailored products like Rihanna, who became a billionaire in less than 2 years. The advantage of understanding the market and understanding how you tailor to the market is a strategic advantage for businesses. It's not only a moral imperative, it becomes how do you become strategically a competitive advantage in this very diverse field. And so, to tie into that, what we heard from our survey and also respondents to our focus groups is that 62% felt that diverse teams was an advantage in terms of finding out how to tailor these AI systems to meet the needs of our communities, as well as individuals, as well as looking at industry segments. There is a bit of a first mover advantage in this field. 1 in 7 Canadian organizations are already using generative AI tools, but less than 25% of them use it on a weekly or frequent basis. Knowing the complexities of these tools and knowing how we can start to delve into tailoring it for our own usage is not only a productivity gain for our nation as Canada, it's also how we start to compete globally on a world stage. So with that, I'd love to introduce some of the people that we discussed and had focus groups conversations with, but also thanking the research group and part of the research group to get us to the findings. As Dalibor said, this is a bit of a precursor for the research that is coming forward and hoping to launch this paper on September 25th so you can really delve into some of these findings. Back over
Aisha,
to you, Dalibor.
this was fantastic. This is fantastic. What I love about what I've just heard you describe is that report is not only raising this as a moral imperative, but it is putting it in the context of improving our productivity and making this good for people and for businesses. So I love that particular angle. So thank you very much for sharing this preview. I think that what we can do now is just very briefly introduce our panels or let the panelists introduce themselves, and let's then have the conversation about this particular topic. So I'm going to first, let's start with Alex. Alex Coleman, would you be so kind to just briefly introduce yourself, let us know who you are and why you're passionate about this topic?
Wow, thank you, Dalibor. Thank you, Aisha. That was incredible. And my name is Alex Coleman. I'm an Assistant Deputy Minister and CIO for the Ontario Public Service, working in the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. I'm also a Deputy Minister for, Assistant Deputy Minister for Data and Business Intelligence. And so I'll just say that a bit of my background, I've now lived and worked in what, 3 countries or in 4 countries in 3 continents, I would say. And I've always been passionate about technology, but even more so people, and of course, the effects of technology on Black people, right, and the less privileged. And I've never seen a time when this has become more urgent, as with the rise of generative AI specifically. and the potential, but then also the issues and the bias that comes with it.
Yes.
So that's why this is something that's very important for me, and is a topic that has to be discussed, and we have to have a plan on how we're going to mitigate these biases. So it's happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for your time. I would also like to welcome Craig Pinnock, the CFO of Northbridge Financial Group. Craig, would you also be so kind to introduce yourself and tell us why you are passionate about this topic?
Well, thank you very much, Dalibor. As you've mentioned, I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Northbridge Financial Corporation. It's a commercial insurer in Canada, and it's the Canadian portion of the Fairfax Group. I'm clearly passionate about diversity broadly, and in the area of the Black community in the last number of years, since some unfortunate events in 2020 in the US. Fairfax has put together a Black Initiative Action Committee. So across its major insurance subsidiaries, we could look at systemic Black racism, things we could do to mitigate, eliminate that, and quite broadly, make sure it's very clear that diversity and the unacceptance of any racism was very clear within all parts of the organization, which of course leads to how you then move towards more of that environment where you're not thinking about it all the time. And a lot of those points have been hit upon. Where you see bias, where you see emerging technologies that are going to grow, develop, and quite frankly consume the human population, more you can think about in advance to get ahead of those areas that are potential pitfalls, a greater chance of success. So this is a conversation I'm thankful to late starting, and I think it's going to create an ongoing conversation that's important.
Absolutely. Thank you, and welcome to the panel. And last, certainly not least, my partner, Shannon Lundquist. Shannon, welcome. And can you also give a bit of intro to our audience?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shannon Lundquist, and I'm a vice chair, and I lead our federal practice here at Deloitte Canada. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional lands and territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am an ally to our Black Action Council, and I will declare early that I am the tech optimist I feel on the panel here. I'm a tech optimist, and I am a true promoter of the fact that we can use AI for good. And I'm excited to talk to you today.
Fantastic. Thank you and welcome. All right, so let's start. I think what we should all do is first set sort of the baseline on what are those key areas of impact that you believe Gen AI will have on your organizations. And maybe, Alex, we can start with you. What do you think? Like, where do you see that key areas of impact of Gen AI within your domain?
Yes, thanks, Dalibor. And I think, because I work for the Ontario Public Service, responsible for 60 million Ontarians, the impact is really massive, right? What generative AI can do, the potential is massive. We provide services for all Ontarians. So even if you look at it from that context, there are definitely opportunities to be more efficient and, effective in the production of services across board for Ontarians, right? I think that is where there's a massive potential. The one thing I'll say is, we are looking at it through the aspect of ensuring that, we have the right use cases for AI, because not everything, not every problem needs an AI hammer. Let me put it that way, right? Yeah. So, so I think just like any other technology, we've got to start with the basics. You have a good use case, a good problem that you can solve with AI, and that's when you use it. Some problems can be solved with just a lean process review, or, or maybe looking at things differently. But so that's an important aspect of what we are doing. Use cases that are critical, that we can build around and develop and make sure we have the security to wrap around it, because, we are holders of course, lots of public information, and then make sure that we can reuse these use cases across the government. That means that we build once and it's reusable, and that way we're able to maintain the security and the standards around it. So several examples. I mean, we have Service Ontario that serves the whole of Ontario when you call for health cards and any other information. Millions of calls, huge potential there. We have things like, the forest fires that come up, right?
Yeah.
We have to help us detect and to minimize the impact. We have in the agriculture area things around our soil testing and different things that we can use. In the social services area where I am, we have so many different legislations and regulations, and actually not only in social services, but we can map across the government. There's a policy for everything. And so, finding, using AI, which works very well when there's large amounts of data and being able to sift through them, be able to, find ways to effectively, find data, but then also to be able to serve our customers faster. So the whole aim is to use this as a job aid, right? To be able to improve our services for the people of Ontario. Wherever we find a good use case, we're going to apply it.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, so from your perspective, you technically could be touching every Ontarian citizen in the scope that you deliver. So the impact will be massive. And Craig, from your perspective, same question. Like, where you are, of course, in financial industry, financial services, where do you see the biggest impact of Gen AI?
Well, I think it's pervasive, and Alex actually talked about a key point that we're always thinking about, which is that use case effectiveness and how you're deploying it to get the best value and making sure you're not spending time on the shiny baubles and you're actually spending time on delivering value. So if I think about broadly first, the areas that I think that we'd be looking at are where we can reduce the amount of time where it's looking for facts, finding information, dealing with communication on technical details, and transferring that into times when you're actually delivering service and you're meeting customer needs. And part of meeting customer needs is ensuring you have a clear understanding of what those needs are. That's where that human value comes in. So the technical aspect, we can have a machine, if you would, do some of that work.
Yes.
A couple of specific examples that jump to mind. If I start with the concept of the chatbot's virtual assistance model and providing 24/7 support, where that becomes really prominent, we've seen this across the country in the last couple of months, during catastrophic events when human resources are stretched to the limit, yet you still have consumers who have claims that need to be looked after. They have policy questions. There's an opportunity for AI to be responsive and situationally responsive, because the same event, which we had over 2 months, a flood, has a different impact and different need if it's happening in Quebec near the St. Laurent, or if it's in Ontario, or if it's something happening in Alberta, based on geographical needs and or the consumer base. So that's an area where you can get that quick real-time responsiveness for the fact-finding component that allows us to get to the actually meeting the needs of the consumer. So I think that's an opportunity in our space, being insurance, that would be useful. The other's in the policy side, because in the small business where people are looking for making sure that they're looked after properly, it's not always easy to know what coverage do I need or how do I describe myself, because the kind of business you're in, if we know that, we can make sure that you have the appropriate coverage and that you get looked after appropriately with the policy. A lot of that is very technical. But if you actually use, which we started looking at, the social media, the internet broadly, you can actually build a really good picture of a business's profile and where their risks and exposures are. When you think about the mass amount of data that is connected, you can take the information of the many, which is here's what a traditional need would be for somebody operating this space, and now be very real-time specific. So it's taking generalized mass information for very personal, specific use case. That's what consumers want. They want to talk about the me in the relationship, and that's what we should be doing. So there's an opportunity. And of course, internally, I'll jump one line. Internally, there's efficiency. So we do claims file auditing and a number of things which we have to make sure we're doing right and appropriately, help us resolve and close. There's an opportunity to get that technical work moved into that space.
Fantastic. This is fantastic. And Shannon, of course, we'd love to hear your perspectives on that. I'm assuming in the context of our business.
Exactly. I think, and I'm hoping a lot of my colleagues are not on, or otherwise they will be, will get scared. But I think Gen AI has the potential to change the entire professional services business. You know, if you think about the work of tax returns or of audit document review. On the technology side of, the technology development and testing, automation, we're already seeing some great use cases around, training development and knowledge management, cyber monitoring. There's so many great use cases where we can use Gen AI to really help us with that. And I think there's a couple of other areas too. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is, how do we bridge that gap between the current user experience and the technology capability, right? And we, in here is what I'll call the creativity quotient. But we can use some of these design principles that Aisha and her team have developed to drive equitable outcomes and improved customer experience.
Yes.
The last thing I will say too, and away from my scary ramble, was, Gen AI is not going to replace humans. It's going to replace some of the tasks that humans do. And if you think about a term called Polanyi's paradox, we know as humans, we know more than we can tell. Like, we have very specific attributes and skills that automation and technology will never replace, things like feeling and reasoning, and they're very uniquely human traits. And I think someone referred to them as the people elements. But I also believe that for the first time since the optimization of the supercomputer, we can let technology do the work of tasks, so that we can focus on only what we can do: humanity, compassion, dreaming, invention, and all of those very critical human skills.
Yes. And this is that optimistic future that you said you believe in, and so do I. And for us, and the beautiful part is that it is in our hands collectively to make the right choices to create that future, as opposed to the dystopian one, which is also a possibility, right? So thank you very much for sharing those perspectives, Shannon. Let's now peel the onion a little bit and go into the layer down and talk about inclusion and AI, and like how are these two things sort of interacting, and what makes them important for the clients that you serve? So Alex, maybe we start there with you.
Yes, thank you. So one of the people that I recently ran into was someone called Ray Kurzweil, and you may have heard about him. He's a futurist, and he talks about the rate of change, leading to change, right? And he said something that if you are 40 years old by now, by the age of 60, you would experience a year's change in 3 months. And if you are 10 years old, you experience a year's change in 11 days, right? So I think we can all attest to that, being, if we think back to, some of us remember 2K, some of us remember mainframe and what the evolution has been. Now it's actually much more rapid. And so if you think of that rate of change, and you think of the fact that we are struggling even to keep up with it, and then you compare that to the fact that in my ministry, we serve the most vulnerable people in Ontario.
Yeah.
People who are on social services, people who have a differently abled, people who need support to live their lives. Then that means that the gap will be exponential if we don't address it now, right? And that is the issue here. So I think really this, and unfortunately amongst these populations, we have a lot of racialized people who make up the majority in these populations, and that is where the issue is, right? We serve actually 1 in 10 Ontarians. And actually, if you extrapolate that by family size, it may be even more. So this is the criticality of the issue. And I think that really we have the potential to set the bar higher, right? We have the potential to use this as a game changer. And that is really how we should be looking at it. There should be no reason why anybody should be disadvantaged by AI, right? It should rather be used as a way to close the gap. And we can do that if we tackle this from the right perspective. Based even on the amazing reports and some of the suggestions, if we look at inclusion and have a focus on being able to close the gap, we can do that and transform the lives of millions of people, right? And I think that is really why this is important, okay? There's talk about images and, other things online. I think we've all seen it. Recently, just before this, I just did a search for a Black president on one of the AI systems. There are at least 54 African countries with Black presidents, at least. Not to mention that there was a Black president in the US, Barack Obama, and I didn't see any picture of a Black president. All I saw were pictures of cartoon characters who were Black. So that way we talk about the bias in the systems and the inherent biases, and we've all heard of the stories from, racialized Nazis and other things. We have to talk about these things because if these things are built into the systems, then you can imagine how it's going to affect the racialized people who are even more vulnerable. Then the gap is just going to be wider and extrapolate, and there'll be no catching up. And so this is why this is important, that there has to be a focus on how we can transform the lives of the more vulnerable people to make sure that they are part. And this is the opportunity that we have.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you're dealing with social services for the Ontario province, and this is your everyday focus, right? So that therefore for you, specifically for you, the concept of fairness and inclusivity in the technology is absolutely essential. Like this is very, very important. Thank you for sharing that. Craig, I would love to get your perspective, like from your angle, the inclusiveness in AI. What's the importance and why?
It's very much along the same lines as what Alex has just started talking about. The core here was for clients, so I'll stick to that premise because I think there's some similar conversation where you think your employee group, your community at large, and how you interact with them. There's a key word in the last 10 years that's been promoted in financial services with respect to those providing those services, and it's fairness. And that fairness component, fair treatment of the consumer, is both in how you price, how you offer services, the way you offer services, where you provide your services, all those good things. The thing we need to work with in AI, and I am a cautious optimist as opposed to an optimist. I think Skynet and the movies that have been made are great social warnings that we need to keep in the forefront of our mind when we think about it. AI is based on large data sets. And I would say today, our largest data set is more biased than less biased, just if you just think about time naturally. And it's not because anybody's doing anything wrong or people are bad. It's just the history up to a certain point has more bias in it based on the way communities operated. So we have to spend, I believe, a little bit more time in thinking about how are we testing for those biases, because you're the best intentions. I think in some of the work that Deloitte did, Aisha, in your report, you talk about a wonderful opportunity to do cancer screening. So I'm cheating a little bit, and people might. I'm talking about what I've seen, and it was not done with the intention of saying people of color or with darker pigmentation should be missed. But the population set that was used to train the model happened to have people with fairer skins, therefore was perfected on a population that made it harder when you broadened it. So the biggest thing I think about is the unintended consequences of really good people doing really good things.
Exactly.
Is what we have to focus on. So we're not saying stop the bad people from doing bad things. It's how do we help the good people with those things we could have expected. So that's a lot of what I think about, and that's going to be the largest serving piece to our community, so we can say we're being fair, but fair factually and fair algorithmically, because that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, this is very good, very good, very good. Aisha, what?
Yeah. Great. So I think you may have frozen Dalibor, but just want to touch on Craig's point. And yes, we are dealing with a data set that does have a legacy in terms of the historical bias that is enacted in it. There's an opportunity to change that. So introducing data that is a bit more diverse. So certainly the one that you preluded to for cancer screening is one, but you can use these data sets to actually inform actions that humans do. So I was listening to a podcast by one of our leaders, Bina Amanat, and in her previous career, she used to use bias data sets to identify for screening for air traffic control, when a pilot or even a technician started to have a bit of an eye droop. So you can see a subsection of that data where there are bits of deviation. And so parts of that deviation, if you filter it, you can actually surface some unique opportunities in the data to inform on how you act. And so that's the sort of indications for organizations to start to think about where are the unique opportunities where we can actually see a segment of our population or even of our market that we haven't targeted in the past.
Can I jump in here?
Oh,
This is getting exciting, so sorry.
of course.
But just wanted to say, to the point about the people who are developing these AI systems and testing it. It's only about 10% of the developers in the US who are Black in AI. And that is the reality. In Canada, I'm sure the number is even lower. And so if you don't have, for example, more Black developers in AI who can even develop it and look at it from that mindset and then test it, then this problem is going to continue, right? And that's why we've seen some of the results that we've seen. And even based on the example I gave, it's unbelievable that somebody wouldn't even just do a check and see that, well, there are no Black presidents here, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is the crux of the issue, right? But then how can we influence? And that's one of the things that we're looking at, influence these major vendors, who are maybe 4 or 5 of them, to ensure that in their cadre of developers and testers, they are having Black developers and other people to look at this in a racialized way to change the data and the testing approaches that we are putting forward. So just wanted to add to that.
That's Alex, an excellent point, and I think this is exactly what I mentioned when I saw the report. How wonderful it is! It's not just talking about the moral imperative, but the actual economic opportunities, and which includes making sure that those equity-seeking community members are intentionally part of the education system, preparing them for careers, right? That has to be the part of the solution, right? So this is very good. So let's indeed talk a little bit about those economic opportunities. So maybe Craig, how do you envision AI contributing to the economic empowerment of the equity-seeking communities?
So a couple of points I will go with. I think for me, economics actually starts back with education and training. If you don't have a deep enough pool of individuals with the skill sets from which to select, then it just thins out as you keep moving through and get to the actual point where we're talking about true economic empowerment and leading organizations and the like. So what excites me about the opportunity in education, and this is putting aside the potential negatives and staying on the positive side of what AI can do. Personalized learning experiences, I think, is an opportunity for us. And it's the ability to dynamically tailor to individual needs at pace. So while someone is involved in a particular session based on initial inputs, potentially based on some socio-economic information they have in advance, more importantly, driven by the responses and the inputs during a session, and be able to pivot left and right for the information they need for success, I think that is tremendous. It's what great teachers do. When I went to school, I had some great teachers. We had a basket of students, and they would pivot to try and make sure that the same lesson, the same outcomes that were desired, were given to each individual. When I grew up, it was still relatively homogeneous. We've got massive diversity in schools now across a number of spectrums. AI has an opportunity, I think, to help with getting everyone the right and same equivalent brand message with their varying paths at the same time. The other part would be improvement to financial services. We have a traditional scoring for credit that occurs right now, and there's stories I could tell myself and talking to some others about people with fantastic credit who apparently don't have the right credit based on the kinds of questions being asked at that point in time. Now, if you extend that into communities where maybe no one has a credit card, and if you don't have a credit card and you have no credit, you're automatically deemed to be bad. And so what we're seeing already, and I went and there's a number of applications or modules that have been developed that are trying to look at transaction history beyond the pure credit card or credit, social media activity, areas of study, psychometric data, which scares me a little bit, but psychometric data, mobile phone usage, online shopping behavior, academic performance. These are all non-traditional indicators of future credit. And one being, you're really trying to measure future behavior, future earning potential within the whole credit environment, so the ability to repay. And I think there's an opportunity by being able to process this information in the way we're processing to see if there are other markers other than I made a credit card payment and I paid it off every month, which is easy and it is actually accurate. I just don't think it's complete. So that excites me.
It doesn't encompass significant populations who do not necessarily use credit card. Like, I see what you mean.
If you permit me, one last thing, and I'll be short. Healthcare and access to quality healthcare, the ability to deliver into communities where you can actually get the high quality of resources based on this technology and the way it interacts with the medical instrumentation that is coming out, I think is another potential opportunity to lift up communities that otherwise couldn't get the human capital to arrive there.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I would love if, would anyone else like to add to what Craig mentioned about the inclusive AI economic opportunities?
Yeah, so if you think from the business side of it, because what Craig has articulated so well is that this is an imperative for the individual and for those in the community. But think about the businesses now understanding that with all of the different points of data that you can build into a system, you are finding new opportunities to get a larger clientele mass. And so these are clients that maybe from the traditional questions that have been asked in terms of credit scoring, don't always allow those individuals to get access to amounts of funding so that they can open a business, so that they can change their wealth gap or change their economic situations. Think about the reverse now, having unique data sets to identify unique individuals who could pay back all of the credit that is being allowed and opening up new avenues for businesses to realize that their earning potential could be elevated by just looking at the problem differently. That's a bit of a mind shift for many organizations that they don't consider, but could consider if they start to look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. And this is for the benefit of everybody. This is for the benefit of our whole.
Yes. Absolutely, for the benefit of everyone. So though the insights have been certainly persuasive in our paper, looking at the Black community and Black professionals, but most certainly we've also seen within Indigenous communities very similar insights from our research. And so having the aperture that you are allowing for different questions to be asked, changing the way access is viewed, and allowing individuals to not only find out unique product offering, financing, or even finding healthcare in an accessible manner, used or stimulated or supported by generative AI, not in intention to remove the element of humans, but also to complement the way that in which we serve them. And Shannon articulated very well that these solutions are not intended to replace you. It is an augmentation to how we work, how we interact with each other, and certainly the opportunity to see unique ways for us to be creative and innovative with the problems that we're certainly contending with.
If I can add to that,
Please, absolutely.
And just picking or maybe on one thing around education, right? So So I think we've all seen more recently the number of killings that have been happening in Ontario, unfortunately. It's all over the news, a lot of killings, and we find that it's actually younger and younger people who are doing it. Younger Black boys and girls, unfortunately, 13, 14-year-olds, right? Now, the question is, why are they, engaged in this behavior? And it could be a myriad of reasons. The reason why I bring this up is youth justice is one of the areas that's in my ministry. So this is something that we are actively talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And if you go back to it, I mean, we've also realized that boys especially, all the studies have shown that boys actually learn differently from girls, right? Boys are maybe more active, more hyperactive. They are able to play these games, online games, gaming, and they can get to the highest levels of scores. But it's difficult for them to sit in a classroom and concentrate, right? Because there's not that activity that they need, okay? So consider an option where you could use AI, like you described, to really have a different learning path for these young kids and really keep them stimulated. And because that is the issue, right? They need the stimulation, they need the challenge. Because what we're doing in these games is there's a challenge, and these young boys can play and defeat thousands of people in a war. Why can't they defeat a math problem? Why can't they focus on it? Because it's part of the challenge, right? And so these are some amazing possibilities with AI that we can actually transform whole societies if we look at it from the right point of view, including education. And this is one of the initiatives that I'm working on with some other partners across Ontario to look at transforming the education. And we have to look at it from even 5, 6 years old. That's young, because actually there's a lot of de-streaming that happens, very early when it comes to Black youth. Very early, they are told to go into other things. So we have to go back to grade 3, grade 4 and change that paradigm, right? But I mean, thanks for mentioning that, Craig, but there's just so much potential, right, in how if we tackle this the right way.
Yeah. Look, but we just heard in the last few minutes where these economic opportunities are in all the foundational aspects of our civilization here, like education, healthcare, financial services, justice. So it's everything, right? Very, very powerful. Now let's peel the onion one layer down still and talk about the principles of building inclusive AI systems. So maybe Shannon, you can share some of your sort of observations and some of your insights on what are those principles of building inclusive AI systems that will then enable these positive outcomes.
Thanks, Dalibor. So first, I strongly encourage everyone in the audience to read the paper that Aisha and her team have developed. And, one of the first things they say out of the gate in the paper is Gen AI isn't magic. And it's not going to get rid of, all of the bias that Craig and Alex and Aisha have talked about. But what we need to do is embrace those ethical, responsible, and inclusive AI and Gen AI development and use to drive equitable outcomes. And they outline a few design principles that address fairness, accountability, transparency, and privacy. And I'm just going to very quickly talk a bit about them. So we've talked quite a lot about bias and strategies around bias mitigation, and the biggest strategy and most effective would be inclusion of folks to start to eliminate that bias. We all have bias, but the more we can include people from different backgrounds, the more we'll be able to mitigate those. Diverse data exploration. So how do we incorporate data sets that include voices and experiences of equity-seeking groups? And if we can do this, it will increase accuracy and relevance, improve trust, provide for revenue opportunities focused on segmentation that Aisha spoke about at the beginning of this call, and enhance those outcomes. And if you think from a customer loyalty perspective, if you have somebody who can say, I'm seen, my unique challenges are being addressed, someone cared enough to include my perspective and design an offer or a service or a product for me, we know that personalization is key, to driving customer loyalty.
Yeah.
Transparency and accountability, we've talked quite a bit about. None of this is going to be perfect. We are really babies in the Gen AI journey. So let's be transparent about how we are developing these systems. The second bigger one I want to just quickly dive into is community engagement, and we've talked a bit about that. So how do we involve equity-seeking groups in this AI development process? Not only just to understand needs and concerns, but it demonstrates a commitment, if you think about this from a business perspective, demonstrates a commitment to inclusion and understanding that integrating perspectives will result in a stronger, more successful, as well as efficient, so speaks to the productivity, impactful, and profitable service or product. A couple more I'll just share with you. Education and training. We've talked about education and leveling all of us up in that way. Ethical standards and fairness. There's a large practice being developed around the world around ethical AI. Safety and privacy, for sure. You know, we talked a little bit about hallucinations as well in this call. How do we manage that? And then, of course, the big G word, governance, and how will we govern this, not just as a community or province or a business, but as a global community.
Can I jump in on one?
Absolutely, please.
Sorry, I was just going to say, so one of the things that's come up, and Shannon, you've commented a couple of times, is keeping the human involved in the AI component. And I really want to emphasize what I believe that means, as we have code that's being developed, and we're talking about code that is checking code for accuracy, and code that is checking that code for deployment. You very quickly can get into a space where the human actually is unable to be involved because they no longer know what it does or how it does it or the language it's been written in. And I think that's a potential in the early days in particular for tremendous negative outcomes, the unintended consequences. A lot of the jobs that early AI is going to replace are jobs disproportionately held by marginalized communities. And if those marginalized communities are not doing that work for all the right efficiency reasons, but don't understand the building blocks, the questions being asked, the formations, and how do you get them to the next level of training and education to take the new jobs that are going to come on? So in the early stages, well, I think forever, have to know what the tool is doing, or even with best intentions, we will take the human out of the equation because we just won't be able to do it. We're seeing a little bit of that now. If I go back to the older people in the audience, COBOL as a language drives most of the financial services and government systems. There are a handful of COBOL programmers. I've seen and heard situations where people just go, I have no idea what it's doing. So you keep it running until you can do a wholesale change. That's not a situation I think we can do with AI, because it's going to move at a way faster clip than that whole COBOL programming transition to more modern languages has. So really, keeping the human in means keeping the human in and understanding.
I agree. And Craig, just so you know, I was that was my first job, COBOL tester. So if you need me.
Excellent. So Alex, we are hearing, of course, Shannon just shared, some perspectives on the framework, of what could be done to create AI systems that will be designed to be more equitable, more inclusive. What gets you excited about these systems emerging that are going to be more equitable and inclusive, Alex?
Sorry, I think that there is a potential to really, change the world we live in, right? And I think that is what excites me. The key will be if we can have the guts, have the courage to do it, right? Let this become more of a profit-oriented exercise, but really a people-oriented focus. And I think that is the key. So if we're able to do that, really, look at equitable design of AI systems, then the potential is endless, right? That means we have a true understanding of our vulnerable populations, and we can use the systems to close the gap, right? So literally, whether it's in education that we've talked about, whether it's in healthcare, but even other specific areas like people who may be vision impaired, right, can now maybe be able to use systems and see. I've read about some work in that area, maybe hearing impaired, maybe disabled or differently abled, but looking at all these areas so that we can close the gap. I think that's where the excitement is, because as a people, we have to worry about each other, and we cannot leave the marginalized behind, right? And
this is the moment. This is the moment, and this technology might very well be the tool to actually help us do what you just said. Bring everybody along, right?
Yes.
Bring everybody along. This is, So I'm assuming that there are some, good practices that are emerging. I would love to know, Craig, if you have seen any best practices or good practices that might be emerging on this, either in other jurisdictions or other countries and so forth. Anything you can share?
Well, I'll take it from two perspectives. The one that's much more prominent and clear is the jurisdictional governance that's being overlaid, whether it be Canada, the EU, Singapore, United States, Australia. They all have various forms of ethical frameworks for AI, some that actually require you to prove out your results against specific marginalized populations to see what that result is, others that go to the evaluation of your data set, and tools that are being developed to do some of the auditing. So I think there are a number of those things that are relevant, and I won't go through the list. It's all available. But if you pick any one jurisdiction, there's a reasonable amount of overlap in what these frameworks are trying to produce. What I will say, though, where I look at a trend that I think is interesting, both for the question that we just talked to, and this is the whole concept of prompt engineering. The ability to write a program, if you have creativity, can ask the right things of an application, which also, in response when I was talking with people at Microsoft, because I raised the same question about how do you keep the humans in every chance I get, they have indicated and shown that you can ask the application not only give you the results based on the desired input, but you can then ask it to tell you how it's doing it. And so the evolution of this concept of learning how to ask the right questions in applying your own creativity, your understanding, is a potential game changer, because now you can go distributed backgrounds, marginalized communities, different cultural groups, whatever your background is, will come at a situation slightly differently. And the application, the AI tool, can recognize that, because a different question being asked a different way gives you a different answer. So anybody who's played with Copilot or the like, ask the same question 3 ways, you're going to get 3 different answers. And if you ask it for something specifically embedded in that, you can get more depth. And so if used properly, I think that allows us to get that diverse knowledge, but also allows for a ramp up in skill development. And it's an area that I think is going to take over. So we're going to type less, even though you can still do it. And can I ask the question the right way, which I actually think is an art that we've been losing in the last couple decades. So this is an opportunity to bring it back.
Yeah, and by the way, that what you just mentioned, we have received a number of questions in the audience. One of the questions actually touches on that. Heather has asked, can nuances in user prompt generation assist in navigating this? Which is exactly what you just mentioned, right? So very, very good, excellent. So another question that came is an interesting one about organizations leveraging their own data sets and the risk that, if those data sets themselves are biased, then of course the results will be. So I don't know, Aisha, Shannon, anyone who would be keen to address that, please do.
I'll take a first stab at it. So it depends on the question that you're asking, or what is the problem that you're trying to solve. So certainly there is going to be inherently bias in the data sets that an organization has, because it's for a particular topic or particular instance or something that they are solving. So if you have, for example, a data set that's looking at all of your new hires, and it doesn't have everybody that maybe was hired on the day that you're looking at information. So it is going to be biased for all of the other people that are not included in it. So certainly when you're looking at the diversity within data sets, sometimes it's also not necessary. So diversity for diversity's sake is great, but it also asks the question, what are you looking for? What problem are you trying to solve? So certainly some data sets within an organization are biased, but there's a necessary evil, or it's not even evil, but there's a necessity to it. So when you're thinking about how you introduce bias, if it is a separate topic, you also have to look at what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and then do I have the right information to allow you to answer that problem? So I know the tool everybody tries to look at for a specific topic, but sometimes the tool is just the tool. You have to look at holistically, what is the problem and what is the situation that will address that problem.
Tool is just a tool, and a fool with a tool is still a fool, right?
There you go.
So be thoughtful. Be thoughtful.
Be thoughtful. Ask those critical
Be
questions
thoughtful,
as you're planning it out. Exactly.
We are approaching the end of our time. I want to be respectful for your time. I want to be very grateful I am for everybody's time today. Thank you very much for being with us and sharing your perspectives and sharing your wisdom. As you have heard, the report will be published on September 25th. At that time, Aisha, we're going to, of course, announce it, and I'm going to make sure that it is also on our LinkedIn channel. And we will tag everybody and share it. So please read it. With that, I'd like to also remind our audience is to join us next Tuesday for another interesting session. We're going to talk about automotive industry and tech disruption. So that'll be very interesting. So next Tuesday, same channel, same time, same place. With that, Alex, Craig, Shannon, Aisha, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lots of fun. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.